Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Leeper, and I'm the Director of Member Networks at Vistage. I'm happy to host this latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. The series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community who provide exceptional insights and best practices to help you navigate new challenges and possibilities. In the post-pandemic labor market, workers have unprecedented leverage and flexibility. Historically low employment, abundant job openings, and fierce competition for talent have changed the employer-employee dynamic, giving workers the upper hand. Together, these factors are fueling workforce velocity, disruption to the labor force as measured by quit rates, open headcount, and days to fill roles. Today, we have Vistage's Chief Research Officer, Joe Galvin, to give insights for you to quell disruption, enhance retention, and better understand and drive employee engagement. Hi, Joe.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much.
You bet. I know we're in good hands today. So, Joe, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking time today to listen to our latest research. Scott said, I'm Chief Research Officer of Vistage. I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. I post content specific to what the Vistage community has identified most important to them most every day. Today, we want to introduce this new concept of workforce velocity. It's a new concept because for all the reasons Scott mentioned, we've never had to deal with this before. It's the movement of workers, and it's driven by two key factors. One is opportunity, and the other is transparency. So we're going to go through the logic and the argument and the data to support this, and then we'll get into the specific things that our researchers identified that you've shared with us to really drive employee retention and why that's so important. Every year in December, as we survey our members, we always ask a couple questions. Oops, here we go. Let's get this powered up. There we go. We ask about your major decisions and investments. And this year, as in many other years, we see that on a decision side, the top is recruiting, hiring, and sourcing. And that's been the 6 years we've done this. That's always been the top answer. Under investments, it's hiring, recruiting, and sourcing. And only recently has that superseded technology as the top response. But what's most interesting to me is when we ask about leadership challenges. At Vistage Research, our job is not to answer questions, it's to ask questions. It's only you know what's right for your business. We ask this one, what's the most significant leadership challenge you're facing right now? How would you answer that question today, or how would you have answered it coming into 23? Well, talent, again, top of the list, hiring, retention, development. Financial management, we're in this uncertain economy. I refer to it as the aftermath economy. Following the extreme volatility of the COVID era, we're now in this period where things are sorting themselves out as we move through this aftermath economy, waiting for the next growth cycle. And then growth. For some of our members, I hear stories of how do I continue and how do I manage this unrelenting growth? Others are, look, we've seen a decline in demand. We're struggling to keep up our growth, but everyone's dealing with changed customers. Whether it's because of COVID or because of inflation, the customer has changed. And these represent the big challenges that folks are changing. And that's the foundation for our research report called Projections, which we put out every year. It looks at what are the issues, what are the decisions, investments, and challenges. And this year, our theme was growing forward. And out of this analysis came three clear themes. One was opportunity in the aftermath. How do you find opportunities for growth as we move through this uncertain and never before experienced aftermath economy? Next was infrastructure for execution. What is the infrastructure we need? Be that your factory, the plant, automation, technology, the physical changes, now the remote workers. What we want to focus on today and what came out loud and clear was this concept of workforce velocity. Workforce velocity, I said, is a new concept and is driven by two key themes. One of those is opportunity, and the other is transparency. Let me show you what I mean. We're playing a game of what I call reverse musical chairs. If you think about musical chairs, right? You remove a chair and you eliminate people. And that's what we did coming out of the Great Recession, right? There were massive layoffs, people lost jobs. If you lost your job, you were out of work for a long time. Now we're in this game of reverse musical chairs where we add chairs, but we don't add people. This is the employment report that just came out this morning. U.S. employers added 187,000 jobs in July. That's new jobs without any increase in the workforce. In fact, 1.8 million jobs have been added in this year alone, in the 7 months. Those are more chairs being added without adding more workers, right? This one's really powerful. If you look at your baseline, it's 1 opening per worker. That's the baseline of 1. And you can see from 2010, as we came out of the Great Recession, it was very, very low. There were a lot more workers than there were available jobs. And then around about 2018, that changed, that flipped to where there's more jobs than workers. And now look off to the right in 2022. Even though we're coming off the peak at the end of the pandemic era, we're still well above, almost 1.6 million jobs above workers available. It's a crazy environment, right? This is opportunity. Workers have opportunity to improve their work status, to find a job that's more aligned with either their career goals, their income goals, or maybe their lifestyle goals, as we've experienced. The chart that it just fascinates me is this one. It's quit rates. This has been referred to as the Great Resignation, meaning people are resigning. But I don't think of it that way at all. I think about it as the big upgrade, right? What's better than an upgrade? Why, Mr. Galvin, thank you for checking in for your flight today. We've been able to upgrade you from the middle seat in the back to a business class seat. And would you like a cocktail? Oh, yeah, come on. Who doesn't want an upgrade? That's what quit rates tell us. People are quitting the jobs they have, leaving companies for a better job, better pay. Maybe it's more aligned with their purpose, or maybe it's closer to how they want to work, be that hybrid or remote or in a more powerful environment. It said hourly employees will cross the road for $1 more an hour. Well, we know that the increase in wages is fueling the opportunities for people to change, to quit. It's a real simple number. In June, 3.8 million quit their jobs. Workers quit their jobs. That means they left the company they were working for and they went to another company. Now, nobody changes jobs to get paid less or take a lower job. They change for more money, more responsibility, align with their career, maybe align with their lifestyle. Maybe they don't want to commute. And their current job says you must come in 5 days a week. Or maybe they're in an environment where the working conditions, because they're an essential employee, isn't something consistent with how they want to work, et cetera, right? In June, that number was 3.5. That was at the peak. That was the high pre-pandemic. April, 10 years ago, it was 2.2. It's workers leaving companies. It's quit rates. And what's powerful about this is you can see how it's changed. Right? In fact, if we look back at history from 2002 to 2008, which is effectively ancient history, it averaged about 2.7. It gets really interesting when we look at 2010 to 2019. I call that the rising tide decade, because as you can see from 2010, as we came out of the Great Recession, to 2019, the pandemic, it was a rising tide. It averaged 2.6, which is close to the 2.7. Interesting, if you split that apart, what you can see is the first half of the decade, it was at 2.1, that accelerated to 3.1 in the second half of the decade as more jobs and fewer workers entered the market, right? A low of 1.5 in August to a high of 3.6 in July of 2019. The last 12 months, that number has averaged 4.0. 4 million people, well above the norms, well above the averages, have quit their job. Like I said, it's all about the big upgrade, right? It's a big upgrade. People are looking to improve their lot in life, to find a better job, right? And who can blame them? This is a chart that comes from ADP Pay Insights, and our good friend Mark Emmer, Vistage speaker, and does a lot of great work for us, shared this in a session he did with us. Who can blame workers, right? It found that the average stayer, someone who stayed in their job, saw a 7.3% increase in pay. Hey, that's great. The changer saw 15.2%. These people that are quitting their jobs, that are quitting their companies, are finding jobs that pay more. Now, we hear about the boomerang employee. We've had a couple of those in our company, people that go and think the grass is greener, and it's not necessarily, and they come back. But there's also people who are able to move up and move over and find the type of job, the type of pay increase, and who hasn't heard a conversation? I've got I've got 2 millennial kids, and they're married to millennials. And, you listen to them and they know friends, B players who got 20, 30% increases to change companies. Well, who's not going to take that risk? Who's not going to take that chance? That's why this is the big upgrade. This is the opportunity that exists for folks. It's driven by unprecedented transparency. So we talked about the opportunity of opportunity for people to move and change as we add jobs, but it's transparency that's driving this. Every job is posted. I don't imagine there's anyone on this call who doesn't have every job open. I'd ask you, how many open headcount do you have today? And how long have you had that open? And how long does it take to fill that job? But every available job is available to everyone looking for every job through sites like ZipRecruiter, Indeed, and every other job site. And if I find out that maybe I am interested in your company, I can go to Glassdoor and now learn or hear from people who are inside the company, whether it's something I'm interested in. So for job seekers, people looking to upgrade, there's unprecedented transparency to every job available. And even if you're not looking for a job, right? You can post your resume online. It's not like the old days, the analog days, where you go out and you print your resume on a nice piece of paper and then mail it to different places, hoping that you would get a look. No, I'm posted. You can find out all that I've done. You can see examples of my work. You can see the people that I know. You can see what I'm commenting on. This is all new. LinkedIn was launched in 2003. At the start of the rising tide decade, 2010, at 70 million users. They're now at 900 million users worldwide. That's 900 million business professionals who've effectively posted their resume online, which means everybody looking for someone, anybody looking for a chief research officer can easily find me because I'm there. These other applications launched in 2010, 04, 07. This was all in preparation for the rising tide decade. And as the economy healed out of 2010 and the rising tide continued to rise, these applications, this technology delivered an unprecedented level of transparency that allowed me to find any job and any job to find me. These two factors, the opportunity and the transparency, has created this concept of workforce velocity. It's all about digital transformation. You know, we learned in the pandemic, those organizations that were further down the path of digital transformation performed better, right? In fact, it's digital transformation that allowed us to move to this new workforce model, and we're not going back. All remote workforce, 11%. That number was 2% pre-pandemic. Hybrid workforce, any knowledge worker, if you're a knowledge worker and you can work from home, you're working from home, right? You know, it might be 3 days in the office, 2 days in the office, no days in the office, whatever it is. That model is not going back. Now, essential workers, whether you're on a factory floor or you're in healthcare or you're in some other profession that requires you to be on site, well, that's got different sets of issues about flexibility, but it all exists. And what's driving it is digital transformation. If COVID had hit 15 years earlier, business would have collapsed because we weren't prepared for it from a technology standpoint. Now we are. We've gone from desktops that were hardwired to laptops that gives us mobility to take my work with me wherever I go. As I said, we've gone from hardwire to Wi-Fi. I no longer have to be in the office and connected. I can connect from home with full security. And the applications have evolved from chat to true collaboration, allowing us to connect, interact, and engage in a digital manner. This digital transformation is driving everything about the business world and the lives that we live in today. Right? This is a really fun one to look at because this is GDP. If we look at 2010, the start of the rising tide decade, GDP was $15 trillion. US GDP was $15 trillion. In 2022, it was $26.8 trillion, the largest economy on the planet. That's an increase of 179%. Our workforce in 2010 was 154 million. 2022 was 164, a growth rate of 6%. So we see this massive improvement of productivity where we see GDP grow by 179%, but our workforce not so much. Technology is a big part of that, there's no question, but allowing people to do more work, right? You got to really think about the industrial era analog office. If you go back to the 1950s, people came to work, 50s, 60s, they came to work because they sat at a desk. Why? Because that's where the files were. That's where the information was. That's where the ledgers were. And floors of people would sit with mechanical calculators or slide rules and enter data into ledgers or go and pull customer files. You had to physically be there. In the 1970s, we got a little more hip and we had these more workspace type concepts. Then came the infamous cube farm of the 1990s, where again, we had to come to the office because that's where the information was. But with information didn't necessarily sit in a physical file cabinet, rather it sat in a database. And I sat at a desktop to access that information. The modern office, it's wireless, it's mobile, it's flexible. You can do whatever. The industrial era analog office is gone, right? And this concept of MF95, now I joke, that's not a new gang, it's not a new mask, but it's that Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 continuum of the industrial era office. It's an environment where attendance meant you had to commute. And there has never been a greater impact to human productivity, anxiety, and frustration than a commute. It's the single biggest waste of time that we've ever experienced. And yet everyone had to go to an office, meant they had to commute, go to the office, come back from the office. And we had this concept that hours meant working. So the number of hours you work were at the office, and you would say, oh, it's early, and look, Joe's here. Oh, it's late, Joe's here. We had this visual perception that attendance equaled working and hours was working. And that's all changed in this new workplace. It's a new workplace I refer to as workplace 180, because it's 180 degrees different from that analog environment. In the analog environment, attendance mattered. You had to show up, and who showed up early and who showed up late. And workplace 180, because you can work from anywhere or anyhow, that no longer matters. What matters in workplace 180 is the worker experience, the employee experience. What does their world look like? What comprises that world that creates an environment where they are not only delivering on one of their expectations, but they're engaged, they're focused, they're committed. And this is all part of where we're going to when we talk about retention, right? In workplace 180, one of the key component is the culture. What's the culture that I work in? The mission, the purpose. Culture was really important pre-pandemic. Millennials were looking for a cultural match, someplace where there was some sense of purpose, and they would request that. Now in post-pandemic, it's not requested, it's required. And the Gen Zs that are coming in, that's specifically what they want. They're looking for a purpose. They want to be connected. They have to be in a physical and emotionally safe environment. They want to be part of a culture that motivates and engages them. The next element of workplace 180 is the boss. There is no one that's more important to a worker's work experience than the person they work for, right? Your boss determines your activities, your performance, sets your goals, rates and evaluates you, determines your raises, sets a political context for you. Your boss is everything. It's often said that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And while that's that's not the only element, it is a big element. And oh, by the way, no one's job has changed more as a result of this mobile environment, of this workplace 180, than the boss. Because the boss used to be able to walk out and look out and see who's in the office and who appears to be working and who doesn't. Now you can't see anybody. Now you have to connect and engage with people both digitally and physically when they're into the office. And the other element is the workspace, which is, if you're an essential worker, it's like, what does my work environment look like? I have to be here, so what are you doing to make it pleasant? If you're a knowledge worker and you can work from home, what is my home experience like versus my in-office experience? It's a physical environment. It's the tools that you provide, the technology, the training, and whatever flexibility means. And that is what creates the workplace 180 and the world of the worker. And that's why it's so important to understand how the workplace has changed, and how, as part of this workforce velocity concept, you need to create a workplace that is going to attract and retain people. Right. So let's get back into the whole concept here about it's been hard to hire. We know that it's not as hard as it was. Are you finding it easier, more difficult to hire this start of the year? We can see here our data over a quarter period. We can see that it's getting a little bit easier. It's not as hard. We know that it's not as intense as it was 18 months ago at the peak of the frenzy. It's cooled a bit, and that's good because things are a little more reasonable. They're still well above where they were pre-pandemic. But I would caution you to say that this is a lull, it's not a trend. That while we're in this slowing economic cycle, as we continue to downshift into this slowing economy that we expect will continue through 2024, this is a lull. That once we get back into the growth cycle in 2025, we will reaccelerate, and the demand for talent will reaccelerate, and we will find it harder and harder to hire people, which is why it's so important to bear in mind the concepts we're going to put forward to do now, so when that hits, you're ready to go. Some folks say, hey, AI is going to save me. AI to the rescue. I don't need people. I can just use AI to do all that. And I'm afraid if I were to ask AI that, I get the same answer that Dave got in 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm afraid I can't do that, right? It's not ready yet. Now, we're a long way from Skynet. Who doesn't love a Terminator movie? We're a long way from Skynet. The reality is that AI will power individual productivity long before the organization can gain. Think about when Excel, PowerPoint, and those things came out. Individuals were more quickly able to adapt that to how they work and what they did than organizations leveraging these massive database and these business applications. Now, we've seen a lot of progress there, but AI is not going to come to the rescue. Having said that, however, there's some things to think about. One is identify the appropriate AI applications for the people that work for you. This is a chart I just grabbed today from a place called AI Tool Report. Great place for sources. Where Word has been now replaced by Chat GPT, right? Images or presentations replacing PowerPoint. Identify the appropriate AI applications for your people, and then train them extensively. And I think of the old story about the CFO who says, what if we train them and they leave? And the CEO says, what if we don't train them and they stay? Identifying the AI applications that will specifically help the workers that work for you, and then training them extensively on it has three huge benefits. One, you're going to drive their productivity much more quickly than waiting for the enterprise AI apps to kick in, right? You're going to train them, and you know what they'll do? They'll quickly figure out how to leverage it in their job. Pretending that ChatGPT and someone's writing a report using ChatGPT, pretending that's not happening is ridiculous. Rather, identify what's important to that worker and train them on that. So one, you're going to improve productivity. One. Two, it becomes a powerful retention tool. As part of your employee development, you're training them on the latest and most powerful capabilities. One of the things we know is that this generation of workers, the millennials and the Zs, they want to be on the most recent technology. They want to learn. Nobody wants to work on a 2002 SQL forms-based app. They want to be on workflow. They want to be on Salesforce. They want to be on these leading applications. They want to be on AI. And three, it becomes a powerful recruiting tool. If you join us, we will train you on the latest and most powerful AI tools to allow you and empower you to drive that productivity and performance. Individuals will more quickly adapt and figure out how to leverage these capabilities in their roles than the organization can learn. And then the last is to accelerate your organizational transformation. Invest more, be more aggressive. Recognize that there will come a point when AI is ubiquitous, that the period or the time where there will be a competitive advantage is in the near term. Now, the near term means the next 3 to 5 years. We're a long way, as I said, from Skynet, and we're a long way from this world where AI is going to replace all these people. Rather, we're in this very early phase. And that's why it's so important to, one, identify the apps they need, train them up on it, and then leverage and accelerate what you're doing organizationally. To help you with that, we've launched an AI research center. My colleague Ann Petrick has done some great work, pulled together a number of great roundtables. There's more to come. And this is where you can connect to the network that Scott's run on AI, webinars that we're doing, expert speakers, resources. Just go to the research center and search AI, and you can find that. We did a report on AI back in the fall of 2018. We're going to update that. We're going to update that in this spring of next year, where we're going to advance what the concept is. But I'm really interested in what are people really doing with AI today, and we're going to break that into individually and then collectively from an organizational standpoint. And then we'll continue to talk more about the future. So the answer is AI is not going to save you today, and it's not going to save you tomorrow, but it is a big part of the future, right? So let's get back. Hiring gets the headlines, right? If hiring's become more difficult, what are you doing in response? Well, what are people doing? Well, what we see here, and not surprising, is that boosting wages, right? You got to compete from a wage standpoint. There's a lot of things to compare, but it's easy to know if I'm making $100 working for you and someone else is offering me $120, I can figure that out pretty quick. But what's important here is not the blue, meaning has implemented. It's the goal that they're planning to implement. And look at the two areas that are tops in this. One is developing the existing workforce. By being able to show and to demonstrate to prospective employees what your employee development program is, that becomes a powerful competitive advantage. Developing leaders as well, and showing potential leaders that come into your organization, or people in your organization that want to be leaders, how you're going to develop them. As we said, no one's more important to a worker than the person they work for, than their boss. So is your motto to let bosses figure it out for themselves? In that case, you'll have individual fiefdoms pursuing individual microcultures, et cetera, versus this is how we manage and lead people, right? Working on this, we did a roundtable with three of our very best chairs, Gary Brunglass from LA, my good buddy Dennis Green from Dallas, and Carol Washburn. They spent a month talking to all their members and came back and said, you know, here's what we learned. Wages obviously are important. And you can find this on the Research Center, right? Two, here's hiring, adding recruiting and how you recruit, and co-op programs and different things that you can do. It was this third one, the marketing discipline, I found interesting. And that is that you need to think about marketing to employees, the way marketing to prospective employees, the way you market to customers, right? Do you have a list of potential people? Do you nurture them? Maybe it's not the right time to hire someone today, but boy, you sure like them and they seem to like you. Well, what are you doing to nurture them until such time as they're ready to move, or they want to jump, or something changes in their world? Applying marketing disciplines to how you hire was a real insight, and some great ideas on how to leverage that. The reality of those, people quit, right? People have quit, they will quit. That's going to happen. So if your retention rates change since the beginning of the year, and again, we see from the bottom of Q1 2022 to Q1 of 23, we can see that it's getting better. The light blue is decreased, the dark blue is increased. So again, as we've seen slowing of the economy, that initial burst of everybody wanting to change and the pent-up demand from the pandemic, when everybody kind of rethought their personal priorities and their purpose and what they wanted to do. As we've settled into this more normal, but this era of workforce velocity, we've seen that stabilized a bit as we go through this lull. But it's important to understand that it'll take longer and cost more to hire someone less qualified, less experienced. That's just the fact of the matter in today's market. And that's not going to change. That's not going to change, right? Again, this same group identified some retention best practices, from core retention about treating employees like customers and choice and flexibility, the importance of culture, which has always been there, but is even more important than ever, but investing in leadership. Again, no one has greater impact on a worker's day-to-day life than the person they work for. And especially in this environment of remote, fully remote or hybrid employees, where you don't have that day-to-day interaction, you don't have that water cooler capability to chat. It's really important that you invest in your leaders and you teach them these skills, because these are new skills to manage remote or hybrid employees that managers didn't have to do before. And that's why we're seeing this surge in leadership development from the manager all the way up to the folks that report directly to the CEO, and the CEO too. And this leads us now to workforce velocity. You know, say, well, John, when are you going to get to it? Well, we're getting there. Workforce velocity. So which of the following people metrics are you currently measuring for your business? Well, how do you measure, how do you measure your workforce? Well, these are the traditional metrics: retention, which has got a variety of definitions, attrition, engagement, time to hire. What I'm suggesting is this: to recognize that workforce velocity is new and something we haven't had to deal with before, is one, you need to measure your quit rate. Very simple. This is the number of people who no longer work for your company on a month-over-month, year-over-year basis. How many people by name work for you on January 1, and how many of those people as a percent have left your organization? That's quit rate. And then to personalize it, it's quit rate over time, which is measuring time to hire. So Scott, we definitely hope this doesn't happen, but Scott announces today, I'm quitting. How long does it take you to hire someone? And then how long would it take to train someone to fill that role? Even if you were to move someone up into that role to bring that person in underneath, it's quits over time. That's how we measure workforce velocity. And that's what leads us to our report, Managing Workforce Velocity. It's attention to retention. We released this report in May, been talking about it and sharing it and just learning a lot from folks. But I wanted to take this now and go deeper on this to help you begin to think about how this can impact your organization. And we'll connect the dots as to why that's important from the long view as we wrap this section up. We asked this question: what improvements have you made to increase employee retention in the past 12 months? How many of you have lost a key employee in the last 6 months, right? That really hurts, right? Just, the impact to morale, why is Scott leaving? the impact of productivity and performance. So we asked folks, what are they doing to improve that? And we got some great responses, and not surprising, top of the list is pay, adjusting base compensation. But once again, I'd ask you to look at the goal, because this is what people are planning to do. And look, it's leadership development and workforce development. Investing in the people that work for you now, helping them to realize their personal goals, helping them to improve in what they do, helping them get better. You'll also notice company culture is right up there at the top of the list. New hire onboarding is seen at 20%. Reward and recognition programs, 20%. Well, we took all this and we did our analysis, which is looking at the data and looking at the responses, and then spending a lot of time thinking really hard about it and working together. And we came out with 4 key themes that came out of this report. The first one is providing competitive compensation. Not a big surprise here, right? Everyone's had to increase wages to keep people, to be competitive, to hire people. We asked this question: what improvements we made? Well, you can see base compensation, bonus and incentive, and employee benefits. A lot of energy has been put into this already. But we published a report with our friend Mark Emmer. Mark Emmer did the heavy lifting, and we wrapped a lot of stuff around it, called The State of Employment and Wages. That came out in November of last year. And it identified some really important things to do as it related to compensation. One is, you got to benchmark wage increases. We know that wages are increasing. You have to be competitive with that, and you need to address where your wages are versus the market into which you're trying to hire. Retain workers is going to cost, it costs more to replace, not just in terms of what the salary is going to cost you, but what you're losing in terms of tribal knowledge, experience, and cultural fit potentially, right? You need to treat, as we said earlier, marketing. You need to market to your employee demographics. Who are the potential workers in your area who could work for you? And what is it about them that they're looking for? And how does that compare? Got to keep pace with the industry and the local averages. People know what people make. I mean, at any social event, people are talking about, hey, how's your job? How's your job? I'm doing this. I just left for that. People talk. Someone new comes into the organization. It takes probably about 12 seconds for everybody to know if they're making more than the people that are there. And so you got to adjust your labor budget. You got to keep pace to keep workers. You can't bring in someone who's new to the organization with less experience, less background, less qualifications, making more than the people that have been there working for you for a long time. So this is what came out of this report. And at the end, I have the links to all these documents. You can quickly find them. So don't worry about trying to sort them out now. Next was investing in workforce development. And this came through loud and clear. Came through loud and clear when we talked about the importance of retaining people and the importance of recruiting people. What improvements have you made to increase employee retention? Well, 30% when it comes to retention are planning to implement leadership development, 29 workforce development. Look at this, new hire onboarding. There is no more important day in a worker's life than that first day. I can think of the first day of every company I've worked for. And as I think about that day and I think about my experience, that day really set the tone for that experience. So what are you doing on the first day of a worker when the worker joins your company? How are you embracing them? How are you engaging them in the culture? How are you pulling them into your workforce? And look at mentorship programs, right? Companies don't have loyalty. Companies are companies, right? People have loyalties. Connecting your workers, connecting especially your high potential workers with executives or more senior people allows for deeper personal connections to be made, which makes it harder for people to leave, because you're not just leaving a job, you're leaving a relationship. And that's why we see this energy around leadership development, workforce, new hire onboarding, and mentorship programs, right? We published a report, I think it was June of last year, on employee development, because this is workforce development, because specific to employees, this is a true competitive advantage. And the reason for it is pretty clear. One, it improves performance, right? You train people in their specific job to do their job better. You cross-train them to do a job that maybe they can cover for someone when they're gone or someone can cover for them. Or you upskill them to be able to take that next job. But it's investing in this work in that person in your workforce to improve performance. That in turn will improve retention because it drives loyalty. It protects revenue. We know that organizations with higher retention rates outperform those with lower retention rates. I mean, you don't need a research analyst to tell you that. We just know that. But I think most importantly, it's about the advantage you have when you're looking to acquire people, when you're looking to recruit them. Everyone can compare numbers, and you got to be competitive with numbers and job roles, et cetera. But to be able to say to someone, and here's our plan for investing in you. Here's what we're going to do to ensure that you can not only perform in your job, but you can realize the career ambitions you have inside the structure of this company. So workforce development, investing in workforce and employee development, it becomes the CEO's competitive advantage. But there's also the boss. And we published this report last year as well called Building a Better Boss. Right? Again, no one has a bigger impact on a worker's day-to-day experience than the person they work for. That boss does so many things for them. It sets the culture, it sets the tone, it creates the environment, it builds the relationships. In this report, we had some of our very best folks contribute to it. Legendary master chair and Vistage speaker Greg Busted talks about accountability. You can't have flexibility without accountability. Accountability is at the core of a true professional relationship. And Greg talks about why that's so important. Our good friend Maggie Graziano talks about culture and how culture meets these basic human needs. I mean, workers fundamentally want two things. They want to know that their work is valued and that their work is part of something greater than themselves. And Maggie talks about some of those concepts. And then my buddy, Dr. Gleb Spursky, probably one of the smartest people on the planet, but he does a lot of research on bias. And he talks about this role of proximity bias, that bosses tend to gravitate to folks that are around them more often versus people that are maybe a little quieter or maybe working from home, and their performance, and how as a leader, you need to understand that. But this report really gets into the importance of the boss and why it's critical to invest in that boss, because that becomes a key component of retention. Our next one is define, model, and reinforce culture. As I said before, culture was really important. It's always been important, but was really important as we moved into the back half of the rising tide decade. Now it's even more important. Why? Because I think all of us at some level during the depths of the pandemic rethought our personal priorities and our purpose, and recognize that for a lot of folks, maybe they weren't willing to get back into the grind, or that they were looking for something that meant more to them, that they were connected to something. That's why culture is so important. Company culture, 20% are investing, 20% rewarded recognition, right? Remote work flexibility. We've kind of, everybody that can work remote are working remote at this point, are in a hybrid model. We published a report on this called Creating a Conscious Culture. The theme was create the culture you want, or you'll get the culture you deserve. Any collection of humans, informally, even if it's for an evening, will form a culture. And a workforce is no different. They have a culture. And the thing about culture is, I think of it as your organizational gravity. You can't see culture. You can't see gravity, but you feel it with every step. You need to think of it as your organizational gravity, and that it holds the good people. It holds your good people to your organization. It keeps them there. It repels the bad, either people you hired that maybe you shouldn't have, or people that aren't willing or don't want to change as the organization change. But most importantly, it attracts the new. It pulls in people who want to be part of what you are, especially for our world of small and medium-sized businesses. You know, the people that work for you, they live in your area. They talk and they compare. This weekend, they'll be at a social event talking about, hey, I work for XYZ Corp, and it's great. It's wonderful. I love it. You know, I work over there, and it's, you know, it's a job. You know, I'm getting paid, but, you know, too much to quit, not enough to stay, blah, blah, blah. That's why it's so powerful. Your culture is to your workforce as your brand is to your customers. Your culture is to your potential workforce as your brand is to your potential customers. That's why culture is so important. Our theme here was you have to make it a priority. Is it part of your day-to-day way of life? Is it how you work every day, enforcing that culture? And oh, by the way, the culture that you espouse as leader, is that carried through to your boss? Because the person as a worker, the person that I work for, my boss creates the culture that I work in. And I've worked in organizations where the boss that I worked for was creating his own culture for his own reasons that was not consistent with the organizational culture. What's happening in your organization? Is that culture consistent? Because the culture I work in is the culture my boss creates for me, right? Has to be connected to metrics. How do you measure culture? Well, that's kind of hard. It's engagement. We'll touch on that in a minute. But it's understanding how your culture drives the metrics and the performance of your organization. Are you are you walking the walk? Are you just talking the talk? Right? Culture begins and it's easy to paint words on walls and hang posters of people rowing boats in a straight line. It's how do you live every day? Do you live with a rule of accountability? Are you on times to meetings? Are you in meetings not on your phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And then you have to be able to articulate that MVP, your mission, your vision, and your purpose. Our mission is what we set out to do. Our vision is where we're going, and our purpose is why we do it. Why we do it. What's the purpose of your organization? And again, do people fully understand that? How well defined is your MVP? Or is it something you talk about once a year at an annual meeting? This is why culture is so important. And leads us to our last, which is understanding and driving engagement. Employee engagement was really starting to come on in the back half of the rising tide decade. As we shifted from having more workers than jobs to having more jobs than workers, engagement really becomes an important thing because it really measures to what degree people are really engaged and committed. So what are you doing? Employee engagement surveys. Look at that. Almost double people are measuring, looking to engage that. And again, you need to think about employee engagement the way you think about Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score measures how likely or willing your customers are to refer you to someone else or speak positively about you. Engagement has the same effect. People that engage, that are more engaged, are going to perform better. They're going to have better attitudes. They're going to be more positive about the organization. Pulse surveys kind of tell them where the heartbeat is right now. But this last one, stay interviews, I found that really interesting because that's more than double the current event. I was in Louisville with my good friend Randy Fields and the great folks in the Louisville market, and we did a session in March. And we were going through some of the early research on this. And we broke out into tables and table discussions, and we came back and said, okay, what everybody learned. Of the 8 tables, 3 of them came back and spoke about stay interviews. The concept of rehiring or re-recruiting your workers, not coming in and evaluating where they are, but interviewing them again, is asking them what's important to them. What do they like about their jobs? How do they think about the person they work for? Think about how you might use stay interviews as a way to connect. Maybe do a skip level stay interview. So have my boss's boss come in and ask me about my job and what I like and what I don't like and what we could do better and what we're not doing good and where we can grow and where you can grow. These are all critical elements to retention and driving the retention in your organization. It's not hard. Employee engagement is not hard to understand. Those organizations with low employee engagement have got more turnover, they're less productive, and they're less profitable, right? Not hard to figure that out, right? Those that have high engagement, well, guess what? They've got lower bad metrics and higher good metrics. Again, it's not hard to figure out why engagement is so important. And engagement is something you can't leave to chance. It requires you do things like stay interviews, pulse interviews. You engage employees. You create a workspace that allows them to be the best they can be. You challenge them through learning and development. You support them by making sure the person they work for, their boss, is good, is capable, is skilled. That boss works with them in a consistent manner, and it's not, yeah, I'm working for Joe and he's an idiot. You want to go work for Scott because Scott's really great. This is what goes on, and this is why engagement becomes so important. Again, I said this, but you need to think about employee engagement the way you think about Net Promoter Score. If you are concerned about what your customers think, you should be concerned about what your employees think. And it's a pretty simple model. It says for those people that are not engaged, well, you want to isolate them. In fact, even in this market, you might want to think about letting them go because what they're doing is they're pulling other people down. They have a negative effect on people. They're an effect of cancer. And you need to isolate them and you need to eliminate them because even if it's hard and it takes a long time to hire a replacement, you simply can't afford to have someone pulling down the people that are trying to get work done. For those people in the middle, well, you want to motivate them. You want to give them a reason to be more engaged. Give them a reason to be more committed. Give them a reason to believe more deeply in the mission, vision, purpose of the company, and most importantly, why they're valued, why their work is important, why their work contributes to something greater than themselves, and why they've got a great opportunity to continue to grow and develop it. And then, of course, you want to celebrate those people that are fully engaged. Reward and recognition. Showcase what success looks like. Showcase what you want your strong employees to look like and why that's so important and why that has meaning to them. That's why this is such a big deal, employee engagement. And those are the four areas when we talk about managing workforce velocity. We spoke about this concept of velocity driven by opportunity and driven by transparency. There's more jobs than there are available workers. We all know people that have left, that have gotten jobs and raises, and we've all lost people that we didn't want to lose and couldn't afford to lose. We've all experienced the time lag it takes to hire them and to bring them up to speed. And that's why this concept of workforce velocity is so important and why it's not going to go away. We know that we have to provide competitive compensation, and that's something that most people have done. But these next three are the ones that really, I think, make the difference between those organizations that are going to be able to hold people and those organizations that are going to continue to lose people. And this is really important. I'll explain that in the next chart, why I think it's so critical. Workforce development, investing in the workers, investing in the people that they work for, their leaders. That's truly critical now. Culture is important, has been important, and will be important. I was presenting on culture, this was a couple of years ago, culture, and afterwards, one of the members came up and said, Joe, what does good culture look like? And we talked about culture for a few minutes and kind of settled on the fact. I said to him, I said, you want to know what culture looks like? Look in the mirror, because you are a direct reflection, or your culture is a direct reflection of you. That's why it's so important to get your culture right, and not just to put it out there, but to live it, to breathe it, and to instill it every day. And then this concept of engagement. If you're not measuring employee engagement, I would suggest you consider it, because it's going to be pretty insightful to understand who is and isn't engaged, why those that are engaged are, and why those that aren't. And most importantly, how do you move the middle? Because chances are that a percentage of the people that are engaged, they're just people that engage, and people that aren't engaged, well, they're showing up because whatever reasons, whatever motivation they have to show up, they show up. So the folks in the middle, how do you move the folks in the middle just a little bit more to the right every day? How do you get them a little bit more engaged, a little more focused, a little more committed? These are the four elements when we talk about attention to retention and this concept of workforce velocity that we think is so important for you to understand. And that's why we've done the research on this. We published a report, and now I've got the opportunity to share it with you. And I'll tell you why it's really important, because if you take a long view of this, and you kind of step back out of today and kind of look over the horizon a little bit, as I mentioned, we're currently in the aftermath economy. The volatility, our confidence index is stabilized. After wild swings during the COVID era, we've now moved between a very narrow range. Now, granted, it's at a level well below, historically below where it's been, but it's stabilized. And we begin to see now that, inflation's coming down, but it's still high. Interest rates are still going up, but it might have peaked. Unemployment's at 3.5%. Quit rates are averaging 4 million, well above any norm of the prior years. But we're settled in this aftermath economy. Our friends at ITR Economics, and hopefully you had a chance to see the webinar that Brian Bolio did with us last month, they're calling for a shallow and short recession in 24, where we'll see some dips. Some sectors may already be in there, like housing, but we'll see others that'll kind of dip. But then we see the next growth cycle. The next growth cycle kick off going into 2025, and that growth cycle will go through 28 or 29. So while today your retention numbers may be improving, you might find it easier to hire, I can assure you that that's a lull. It's not a trend. That once the growth cycle kicks off again, the demand for people, the volume of opportunities, and the number of jobs added in this crazy game of reverse musical chairs will accelerate. And we'll be right back where we were in the frenzy of 2021, when everybody was leaving and everyone was hiring and everybody's looking for people. And that's important, because if you look even further over the horizon to 2030, and again, I default to my friends at ITR, Brian and Alan Bolio, who talk about the Great Depression, that in 2030, driven by demographics, cost of healthcare, national debt, among others, we'll enter into a Great Depression, 4 to 6 years in length. It'll be global in nature. It will be a crushing experience for all of us. But between now and then, between 25 and 28 or 29, we're going to be in this growth cycle. And the growth cycle is going to be the opportunity to really grow the business, to set the business in a place where it can survive 2030. Because on the other side of that will be a tremendous opportunity, the single greatest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetimes, provided you can be prepared for that. But in the meantime, riding through the aftermath economy, preparing for the growth cycle is critical, because although AI is on the horizon, and yes, AI will help, and technology has made that gap between number of workers and GDP possible, it's still humans that are important. In fact, I like to say that as humans are the fossil fuel of the growth engine, and the degree to which you can retain great workers for your organization will make it easier to attract and bring in more great workers, because you will need them. You will need them as we move into the growth cycle. And the time to prepare for that is now. As we move through the balance of this year and into next year, the time to set the tone for that retention is now. Because once the opportunities begin to accelerate and crazy money gets thrown around again, you want your people rock solid in your business. And you want to be best positioned to go out and hire people, potentially from your competitors, as people look to find the next great opportunity for themselves. I'm Joe Galvin. I'm your Chief Research Officer. It was such a privilege to be part of this community and to be able to study what you, the Vistage members, tell us are most important to you. As I mentioned, the research reports I mentioned, you'll get a copy of this report afterwards, but you can follow these links and get to these reports. But it's just a privilege and a pleasure to share this with you and have the opportunity to share the things that we're thinking about and that we're working on. And again, I thank you so much for that opportunity. With that, Scott, I'll turn to you and say, are there any questions that we can talk about here while we got a few minutes left?
Yeah, Joe, we do. Thank you. That was quite a packed session of some fabulous and valuable information. So we did get a few questions coming in, so we can kind of tackle them. And what a great image you presented with this musical chair, reversed musical chair concept. That was kind of unique. I hadn't heard that before, but the question comes in about emerging technologies or tools that CEOs really should be considering in their talent management strategies. Anything that comes to mind that you might share there?
Yeah, I think what's powerful when you talk about talent management, there's a couple aspects. One is when you talk about attracting employees, this is where applying those marketing type, marketing automation, nurturing campaigns, things that you do to nurture customers, to apply those technologies to hiring. Next, we're beginning to see AI, and it's one of the early areas where AI at an organizational level is having benefits. That is the ability to not just customize text to the type of job or the type of person, but to understand more completely the type of people that are engaging in your organization. And the third, and I would move this beyond just the hiring, but that is ensuring that the type of applications that you have and the type of business applications and technologies, and this includes automation on the factory floor and other types of things like that, that you're really not maybe necessarily on the edge, but these are the most up-to-date and current technologies. Workers, especially Gen Zs and millennials, they want to work with the latest technologies. They want to be learning and improving and developing their skills. And that's why it's really important that the suite of capabilities, the suite of technologies that you do employ are up to date, they're current, and that people can grow into it. Interesting.
Speaking of social media and millennials, and you talked about that transparency. Someone brought up a question about the expectations of recent grads and regular title changes and advancement. Is there some trends we're seeing there that have changed? I mean, back in the old days, so you talked about the paper resume. You used to get a job, you'd work for 5 years or so, and you'd earn that advancement. And it seems like that has maybe changed a little bit. Are there any trends there you're seeing?
Well, yeah, I think it has changed a little bit. A lot of that has to do with a generational shift. You think about your Gen Zs who are entering the workforce. They're in a workforce that's flooded with opportunity. Where a lot of your millennials came into the workforce in the 80s and the 90s when the economy wasn't that great. There weren't that many opportunities. So their expectations are a little bit higher. They've also grown up in an era of transparency, and they're beyond digital natives. They've been playing with on iPads and stuff since they were in the crib. So the expectation is there, but I would also temper that by saying that humans remain humans. And even though you and I may have grown up back in the days of paper, there were still folks who felt they should get promoted every quarter, or every 6 months, or every year. And there are other folks that were happy digging along. So I think part of it is the nature of humans, but I think the undercurrent of this is opportunity and transparency. That the Zs, and I'm fortunate that Tessa, who works with us, is a Z, and she's a hard worker and she's dedicated and committed, but she's also digitally fluent and she can go find whatever job she's looking for. So it's incumbent upon us to create an environment that feeds her need for growth, feeds her need to learn, feeds her need to be part of something, and feeds her need to have a path. So I think, yeah, I think it's driven by opportunity and the transparency, but I also think there's the human nature of always wanting more and the ability to step up when that opportunity presents itself.
Right, right. And, leadership development plays a big part of that. Someone asked, is there a simple calculation? How do you calculate ROI on keeping an employee? Do you have a simple way to explain that?
I don't have a simple way to do it other than to say, think about the last person that left your organization. There's the impact to productivity as that job goes vacant. There's the unmeasurable impact as other workers have to step up and try to fill that gap. There's the people whose time is consumed in the recruit hire, the recruit and identify, recruit, hire phase. And then the resources and time in terms of getting that person up to speed. Now, I know that ADP and some of the HR firms have gone through and created models. I don't know that you can apply a generic model to any organization other than to respect the fact that it'll take longer and cost more to hire someone less experienced and less capable to fill that job. So I don't know that you can put math to it. It's like how long is a piece of string? I don't know, but I know that when you lose someone, even a marginal employee, it hurts. It hurts from a morale standpoint, from a performance standpoint. But no, I don't have a calculator for you on that one.
Okay. Workforce 180 you talked about. Love the circles there. Culture is a big thing now. A lot of people are talking about it. It's important in retention. Your mirror image, take a look in the mirror was a great one. One thing that, have you seen any key trends or how companies create sustainable cultures? How do you keep up with that?
Well, it's sustainable culture is driven on a couple of things. In fact, in our report on creating a conscious culture, we have a model, and one of the elements is this concept of rituals. What are the rituals? What are the things that your tribe does on a regular basis? Maybe that's quarterly employee meetings where you recognize top performers. Maybe it's employee of the month or employee of the year. What are the things that you do on a regular basis that reinforce this? As a leader, as a CEO, are you constantly reinforcing the culture? But I think, Scott, I'll come back to this. It's a point I've probably said too many times, but it comes back to the culture that I live is the culture that my boss creates. So if you want to drive sustainable culture, what are you as a leader doing to ensure the bosses, the people who manage the people that get the work done, that they're living and breathing and exposing and leading by example your culture every day in terms of integrity, in terms of behaviors, in terms of those values that your organization has identified as really important.
You can't just buy lunch one day and hope it hangs on for a long time, right? Hey,
Taco Tuesday is an easy thing to do. It's how do you get motivated Wednesday and engaged Thursday? That is where your culture comes in.
That's right. That's right.
Not to be nothing wrong with Taco Tuesday. I'm a big fan of that.
Yes, big fan. Well, Joe, fabulous information. Thank you. You guys are doing great stuff with Vistage Research. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Scott.
We will be sending out a link to today's slides and recording within about 24 hours. And for our members, you don't want to miss our Vistage exclusive session with best-selling author and organizational psychologist Adam Grant. On August 25th, Grant will offer ways for business owners and leaders like you to identify and harness the power of knowing what you don't know. Members can just register for that on My Vistage. Also, be sure to join us for any upcoming webinars available to everyone, including September 1st, Exploring Asset Protection Strategies Amidst Financial Market Volatility. September 8th, De-Weaponize Accountability for High-Performing Teams. And September 22nd, Future-Proof Talent. What matters to tomorrow's workplace matters today. I'm Scott Leeper, Director of Member Networks at Vistage, and I thank you for attending today. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Stay safe and be kind.